Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. On today's show, Matt O'Lean had a chance to sit down with a special guest.
Coming up later on Prairie Pulse, we'll have highlights from the Poetry Out Loud competition at Bismarck High School. But first, our guest is world-class triathlete and Mott, North Dakota native, Melanie Carvel. Melanie, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having
Melanie's
me.
book that she's promoting is called Running with the Antelope, Life, Fitness, and Grit on the Northern Plains. Thank you for being here. First off, just tell us about yourself, your background, where you're from originally, and how you became not only an athlete, but an author.
Well, I grew up in the town of Mott. Mott's the spot where the girls are hot, you know.
Is that what they say? Okay.
There's a few other jingles,
Okay.
but that's the one that I'll go by. But, you know, born into a very modest small town family. Had three brothers and one sister, and from Mott went on to University of North Dakota, where I got my bachelor's in physical therapy. And my husband and I lived for a short time over in the UK in Scotland, where my first daughter was born. But then Bismarck has been our home. We've settled in at Bismarck, and physical therapist by background, and you know, being active was always something that I enjoyed doing. I ran cross country and track up at University of North Dakota, and in high school played basketball and was a cheerleader, but was always a very modest athlete for sure. To start with.
But you ended up being a triathlete. How did that start? And
you know,
that's crazy. Huh?
it you know, kind of a long and winding road. Like I said, I ran in college for UND, and one of my goals was to run a marathon. And after I finished my first marathon, I struggled with an Achilles tendonitis. So for cross training, I jumped on a bike. And then later that summer, some friends of mine in Bismarck were doing a triathlon, and kind of said, come and check it out. All you'd have to pick up is the swim, because you can run and bike. And so that's sort of how it started, and just found that mixing up those three sports together was a really fun way to stay in shape and to not struggle with injury as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, why write the book? What gave you the impetus to write this book? Part memoir, part self-help book, I think you said?
Right. You know, one of the common themes of the book is that we never know when a kind word or a little bit of interest or encouragement from another person can sort of take us down a path that we never thought we might go on. And in college, I was a very mediocre athlete, and after my first cross-country meet at UND, where I finished, if I wasn't last, I was pretty close to last, I was so ready to throw in the towel and was pretty embarrassed and thought maybe I was embarrassing the team as well. And there was one particular girl on my cross-country team, probably the fastest runner on the team, that kind of always looped back to help us slower gals out, who said, you know, hang in there, it's going to get better, it's going to get easier. And so that theme definitely reappears. And 8 years ago, I had a big back surgery, a spinal fusion. And while I was recovering from that, I was a walker. And at the same time, a friend of mine, Clay Jenkinson, was trying to get in shape for a big walk along the Missouri River. So he said, come and be my trainer and help me with this training to get ready for this big trek. And so it was on his encouragement. He would say, you know, because you know how it is when you're training with someone or working out with someone, you have those conversations that you really only earn with your legs. And so, of course, we'd talk, and I would tell him stories, some of them ups and downs of training and racing and parenting and work, and he would say, you have a book there. You've got to go home and write that down.
Right.
You know, go home and write that down. And so he pestered me, and he would ask me, you know, have you started writing? And pretty soon I would do what any person would do. I started fibbing and saying, oh yeah, I've started writing. And then he wanted to read what I wrote. So then I really had to sit down and write. But and it's one of those things too, when what I always recommend to people, you know, if you want to fail at whatever goal you're going for, whether you're trying to quit smoking or run a marathon or write a book, keep it a secret. But if you really want to succeed, you know, we are so wired for human connection. If you talk about it and build support and tell people, pretty soon they'll be saying, how's that book coming? You know, when's that book coming out? And so that's kind of how it started, and for a number of different reasons. My parents were getting older. My dad just died this past fall, and such a historian. Physically he was failing, but mentally just as sharp as ever. And so it was a really good time for me to get a lot of those family stories down on paper. You know, the stories of the Germans from Russia, and you know, how they ended up here and made a go of it in this harsh place. And so, you know, at that time I thought, gosh, even if the book doesn't get published, at least I'll have some of these family stories down on paper too. And along the way in my career, I ended up doing a lot of public speaking, motivational speaking on fitness and exercise, and one of the common things that I found was people really didn't need to know information about how to do it. What they were really craving for was more motivation, inspiration. How do I fit this into my day? How do I and so all those things kind of came to an intersection, and decided to write the book about the time that I went through my surgery, because I ended up having a lot more time in my hands. I went from being a world-class triathlete to being a mall walker. Not that mall walking isn't competitive, because some of those people are pretty competitive. But so I had some time on my hands as well as I was recovering from that, and just started to get some things down on paper in no particular order.
And what does the title mean, Running with the Antelope?
You know, it's in reference to some of the interactions that I've had out in nature. I mean, we live in a harsh climate, and a lot of times we do have to work out inside. But I really wanted it to be a North Dakota book, and I really wanted people to get outside and enjoy this beautiful state and all its 4 seasons. And if you do, there's a chance to have some encounters out there that can be very spiritual and mystical, and a lot of fun. It could have been cycling with a bison. It could have been, you know, my son and I, he lives out in Great Falls, and he's a cyclist as well. One morning a couple summers ago, we got out for a very early morning ride just as the sun was coming up, and we were in a pace line, you know, just slingshotting off each other, not saying much of anything, and going pretty fast. It was just a beautiful morning. We were out on a little side highway, and right alongside of us, they were behind the fence line, but a couple horses decided to race us for what seemed like a long time, but maybe it was only a few moments. And for that short moment in time, we felt like we were running with them, and they were keeping pace with us, and it was just this beautiful snapshot in time. So part of it is just to really encourage people to get out, see what they can see, do what they can do. And
what's been the reaction to the book? You've been
Wow.
doing book signings, you've been all over the place, I think.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. You know, I kind of liken a book to writing a book to a lot of the similar things that you go through when you're training for a big race. You're training for national triathlon championships. You know, you have to put your ego out on the line to toe the starting line in a race, and kind of the same sort of experience with this too. There's a lot of different feelings when the book comes out. You know, are people going to like it? Are they not going to like it? Who have I either offended by a mission or by what I've said? And it's just, you're really putting your ego out on the line. But I've just been embraced with it, and probably some of the best comments have been from people who have said, this is my story too. You know, I grew up in small town North Dakota too, and it just made me so nostalgic, and I could relate to it, and I could relate to your stories about community and about struggle and about perseverance. It was funny. I got a call from Byron Dorgan, and I don't know Byron well. Of course, I've always been an admirer of him, but he called to let me know how much he enjoyed the book, and he said, I knew all the characters, because of course he's from Regent.
Right.
And he said, I used to cruise up and down Main Street looking for girls, and you know, it was just such a compliment, again, to hear that people could relate to it. So,
Right.
So that part is great. And like training for a big race as well, you know, writing a book, there's those ups and downs. When you go out and train, some days you feel great, and you know the miles fly by, and then other days it's just a struggle. And I was very humbled by how hard. It took me 8 years to write it, and there were lots of ups and downs along the way. And it's much easier to ride 100 miles on a bike against the wind than it is to craft the perfect paragraph.
It's hard to write, yes it is.
The perfect paragraph that describes what
Right,
it was like
right.
to. So, and I wasn't a writer. I'm a physical therapist. So it was tough sledding many times along the way. But that's what life is. And there really are a lot of parallels to being an athlete and being a writer. Being an athlete, you want to try to do something every day. You can't wait till the last minute when there's a deadline of a race. And same thing with this. I found that if I just kept pedaling on the project, that hopefully it would come to fruition.
Maybe you can put this into words. What is it about growing up in North Dakota, Mott, that's made you who you are today? Can you put that into words?
I think that in a large part we're all a product of the communities and the people that we grew up around. There's a lot of pros and cons of small towns,
Right.
but for me, I think a large part of it was that sense of community and being able to really do anything and everything and almost be expected to. I did everything that I possibly could, started playing organ in church. I'm sure it was just awful when I was in 4th grade because we really needed somebody to be able to do it, and was on the track team and threw the shot put because we didn't have anybody to do that, as well as, you really need to contribute to make those small towns go, and you're never turned away. I don't know that I would have had the confidence or the leadership skills to tackle some of the things that I did, but you never got cut from a team. We needed everybody and to make those little towns go. And so, and I grew up in a family of parents who worked very, very hard. My dad owned a bar in Mott, and he really taught me hard work. He taught me customer service. One of his lines always was, well, they're a good customer, and he realized the importance of that, and through him I realized the importance of that too. My mom was the kind of person where if you wanted to have a conversation with her, you had to follow her around.
Okay.
From the garden to the clothesline,
Yeah.
to the laundry
Right.
room, to the kitchen, and so everybody looked out for you. Everybody knew what you were up to, whether it was good or bad. And if you're not in church on Sunday in Mott in your usual spot, people know you skipped church.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a great place to grow up and a great place to have a lot of opportunity.
Now, of course, you're a triathlete and you write about being fit, but of course, you mentioned pros and cons. One of the cons in North Dakota is there's a lot of people who drink, a lot of people not in good shape.
Right.
We see that with obesity rates and drinking rates. Is your message that anybody can be in shape, or how does that start to make
Yeah.
that determination to,
Yeah.
I mean, because it's not everybody's going to do it.
Right, and it's a huge problem. Like
Yes.
you say, right now we're on track. We're in the fry pan and heading for the fire for our rates of, especially type 2 diabetes, which of course is what
Right.
follows right on the heels of obesity. So there's a tsunami out there that if we don't do something about it, we're really going to be in trouble. And we spend $2.5 trillion a year on healthcare, and 80% of that $2.5 trillion is because of lifestyle. Too much drinking, too much eating, too much smoking, too much alcohol and stress, and too little exercise. So it's all things that we can do something about, but Nike says just do it, but we know that it's not that easy. So my hope with the book is that, it's not a how-to book, and I don't want to shake a crooked finger at anybody or guilt anybody into anything, but hopefully inspire and motivate. We really know the things that don't help with behavior change. you can't force anybody. You know, if you lay all the facts out on the table for them, that isn't all that.
Like smoking's going to kill you.
Yeah,
It
don't
doesn't
you know?
matter, right?
Yeah, you know, so we know that those kinds of things don't help. Finger pointing and guilt and all of that. So what does help? And the things that do help are trying to help people figure out how to get into a routine, because routines can really help us. Things like repetition and reinforcement and rewards, and you know, we all want to have that autonomy and mastery. So again, getting into that habit or that routine where we can, you know, practice something and learn it and master it, that helps us to move in the right direction too. And probably one of the most important things is reframing what we're doing. If we think of exercise as a necessary evil that's going to be painful and miserable, then we shouldn't be surprised when, you know, when it becomes that. But if you can kind of turn things around and look at it in a different light, I always try to challenge people instead of saying, I have to do this and I have to do that, I get to. You know, if we can look at exercise as something that is a real blessing, that, you know, there's a million people who would take, you know, our place in a minute to be able to do what we can do. And so to really look at it with that spirit of gratitude and thankfulness, and that always helps me. You know, and same thing with nutrition. You can look at it as something that's really restrictive. I can't eat this, I shouldn't eat that. But if you can turn that around and reframe it and look at it as something that's, you know, it's nourishment. It's what we need to do to take care of ourselves. So that's a big theme of the book, is, you know, rather than, you know, trying to make it be something that is a necessary evil, you know, as something that will just, as good as exercise is for our muscles and bones, it's even so much better for our spirit. And
We've got a couple minutes left. Can you do a read of passage?
Sure. One of the things that has resonated with some of the people that have read the book have been from women that I've heard of that have asked me or have told me that they loved hearing about how important it was for them to set a good example for their children, because sometimes they struggle with trying to fit exercise in and whether they really should take the time to do it. So this is just a short passage about that. So we need to instill in young people strength of spirit and strength of mind, but also strength of body and good health. Setting aside time to do something good for our bodies may itself provide children with a worthy lifelong lesson. Children will most often live what they observe in parents. Perhaps the best hope that children will take care of their health as adults is what they learn while young. They don't always listen to us, but they rarely fail to imitate us. They see what we do and the choices we make. If we have a healthy relationship with food and exercise, they most likely will too. If we hop from one crazy diet to the next and think of exercise as torture, they may do and think the same. Experiences of our youth will define and shape our adult lives. Time spent caring for our physical needs in our 20s, 30s, and 40s make for more lively grandparents in our 50s and 60s, and for being less of a burden to others in our 70s and 80s. So,
Very good.
Yeah.
If people want to get the book, where can they go? How can they get it?
Well, it's available anywhere here in Fargo. It's at Zambros and Barnes & Noble, but it was published by the Dakota Institute at Fort Mandan.
Clay,
so
right?
yeah, so
okay.
fortmandan.com. They can order the book from if they want to support the local nonprofit publisher, which would be great. I can always personalize those if they order them through there, and we can ship them anywhere. But it's available on Amazon and anywhere nationwide.
Okay. And of course, Clay is a big friend of Prairie Public, so I know he wrote the foreword, and that was
He
a big
did,
deal for
he
you. So
did.
yeah, that's great.
So
Thank you, Melanie.
yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Our guest has been Melanie Carvel. The book is Running with the Antelope: Life, Fitness, and Grit on the Northern Plains. And stay tuned for more.
Poetry Out Loud is a contest that encourages the nation's youth to learn about great poetry. The program helps students master public speaking skills, build self-confidence, and learn about their literary heritage. Before preparation began for 2014 North Dakota State competition, 3 teachers from Bismarck High School talked about why they chose to include Poetry Out Loud as part of their curriculum.
All right, here's a little bit about it. You have a very cool opportunity to compete in a Poetry Out Loud competition at BHS. I think it's one of the most worthwhile programs available to students. It's accessible to every single student. It's available to teachers to implement in the classroom. You could do it as a school. There's so many avenues and possibilities with this program that make it worthwhile.
Oh, chimes sit high on the sunny tower. Ring on unendingly.
When I was in the 5th grade, my teacher, Sister Rita, made us all memorize a poem, and that poem has stuck with me ever since I was in the 5th grade. And I just always believe that it's important for someone, for everyone, to have a poem that they know. One poem, one piece that they can recite. And most of the students do pick poems that mean something personal to them, and that kind of helps that stay with them even longer.
I breathed a song into the air. It fell to earth, and I knew not where.
A lot of students today, we always have devices around like an iPhone or a tablet, even a computer that they basically memorize things for us. And when you memorize things or recite items, you use 3 main parts of your brain. You use the frontal lobe, which helps with organizing the thoughts. You use the temporal lobe, which helps with language and coding your message. And then you use the cerebellum, which is the rhythm and the flow of the piece. And so they're using critical thinking skills all simultaneously, and they don't even know it. And it's a good habit to do, and it's fun as well, using poetry to use as a tool. You get 5 times in your life when it would help you to know a poem. And you can be funny, you can be serious, okay? I also think it adds a lot of engagement with the text that you may not get if you just read or analyze a piece. They find a piece that is meaningful to them, that they have a connection to, and so they interact with that on a personal level rather than just on a surface level.
Look at the first line. Where's the consonants in the first line?
He just keeps saying sorry and stuff.
So I start off the unit by telling kids they have a chance to win $20,000. Now it's a pretty big carrot, and you got to jump through quite a few hoops to get there. But I hear several students saying, I'm really going to take this seriously, or I'm really going to try really hard at this. And showing them the national winners on video and their poem recitation of 2.5 minutes, and that's what you have to do, it makes it seem like it's achievable to them. So I think using that carrot is a pretty easy way to get them going.
I looked at it as a unique opportunity for the students as well. So many are involved with athletics and fine arts competition, and this was a way to implement a competition in the classroom, and they can benefit from it outside of the classroom as well. And so it just opened up the door to a lot of unique opportunities for them, and pushing them and challenging them also in a way that they may not do on their own.
Anybody can do it. Anybody can participate. It's not as hard as you think. I memorized a couple of poems just to prove to the students that it's possible. Even teachers can do it on a short notice, and I might not do it as well as the national champion, but it is possible.
When I behold upon the night's starred face, huge cloudy symbols of a high romance.
We do spend a lot of time on teaching them tips on how to memorize a piece, how to portray yourself in front of a crowd, stage presence, and once they realize that they've successfully done it once, and now in a competition atmosphere as well, I think they'll carry that success with them and use it their whole life.
Now, when we do our poems, it's not about movement and gestures. It's all about the voice. When we look at poetry, we look at, the structure, the rhyme, the meter, the symbolism, and very analytical. And I feel like when we do that, students can have sort of a stagnant approach. And so I think doing something like Poetry Out Loud, where they're asked to stand up and recite and give that meaning, not through a written description, but through their vocal interpretation, I think that makes poetry come alive a little bit more for them.
You need to look at pop culture. We kind of talked a little bit about yesterday what pop culture is. Think of any TV shows or movies, or books for that matter, where a character recites a poem. I've dragged my feet for a few years now. I thought, oh, this would be a good idea to do. I'm just too busy. My advice is just do it. It's a lot of fun. It's very easy to implement into the classroom. There's a lot of great online resources. There's lesson plans that the Poetry Foundation has set up for you that you could use. And you can also tweak those lesson plans to fit your classroom as well.
Welcome to the 2014 North Dakota Poetry Out Loud semifinals competition.
Poetry chronicles our lives, and poems capture the essence of who we are as people.
White are my hands as the snowdrop.
Life is too strong for you.
Hope is the thing with feathers.
And that tradition, whether it's written or oral, needs to be passed on.
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse for this week. And as always, thanks for watching.
Funded by the North Dakota Council on the Arts and by the members of Prairie Public.